This video is part 1 of a 2-part series. In this video, I'll examine why the 7 train is almost universally beloved and what different lessons QBL can take from the 7. In the second part, I will go deeper on deinterlining QBL and whether it is worth it. So with that being said, let's begin. Queens has 2 main subway lines, yet they cannot be any more different. On the one hand is the 7 train, where trains are fast, consistent, and generally frequent. And on the other is the Queens Boulevard line, or QBL for short, where trains are slow, bunched, and unreliable. It is a tale of 2 cities, where the 7 is one of the best in the New York City subway, and QBL, not so much. Yes, I have had my fair share of horrible experiences on the 7, mainly from overcrowding and the occasional delay. And yes, QBL sometimes treats me right. But generally speaking, I much prefer the 7 over QBL, and I am hardly alone. Almost every ranking of the New York City subway has the 7 in the top 3, while the E, F, M, and R, the 4 lines that make up QBL, usually lags behind in the lower half. So, what does the 7 train have that QBL doesn't? Because clearly the 7 is more universally loved. After all, I can Google, "I like the 7 train New York City subway," and results pop up. Meanwhile, if I try to Google "I like QBL New York City subway," not so much. In this video, we will go over 5 reasons why the 7 train is better than QBL, before talking about how to improve QBL. We will start with the most obvious, interlining. The 7 is completely deinterlined from the rest of the system. This means you see virtually no delays from other trains, except that merge at 33rd Street, though that can be better timed. Meanwhile, QBL is a mess of interlining and merging conflicts, and it starts literally when the line begins in Manhattan, as a branch of the 8th Avenue line. A second merge starts near 5th Avenue 53rd Street, where M trains branch off from the F and merge onto the E. The third merging conflict at Queens Plaza is the worst. The R branches off from the N and W and merges with the M branching off from the E. Then combine that with the F train emerging from the 63rd Street tunnel to merge with the E, and you have yourself a merging nightmare. Finally, the F branches off from the E either at 75th Avenue or Briarwood, depending on the time of day. Here, you have 4 instances of merging conflicts, as opposed to only 1 on the 7 train, or 2 if you count the short turns at Metz Willets Point. And the merging conflicts on the 7 are different from QBL, where you are timing 2 trains on the 7, as opposed to 3 or 4. As I maintain on this channel, timing 2 trains is fine, timing 3 is pushing it, and timing 4 is almost impossible. That timing of 3 or 4 trains is present on QBL, especially at Queens Plaza. All of these merging conflicts create delays. Major delays, as shown by this graph, where the variability graphs at Queens Plaza stick out like a sore thumb. If your trains are extremely variable, that means your ability to time and schedule trains goes with it. This is why trains bunch and are unreliable on QBL, as opposed to the 7 train. But interlining is one part of the delay equation. The other part is the terminals. Yes, Flushing Main Street is bad at turning around trains. However, there are options for short-turning the 7, as there is a grade separated access to the Corona Yard, thus allowing trains to turn at 111th Street or Metz Willets Point. Also, in 2015, the 7 was extended to the west to Hudson Yards, replacing a terrible terminal at Times Square with a more efficient one. Because Hudson Yards has high-speed switches just before the station, plus tail tracks that can store 6 trains total, it allows trains to speed into the station, as opposed to crawling through it. That speeding into the station is key, as it'll take less time for the operators to get into the station, clear the train, and get it back moving again. This is why Hudson Yards can turn 30 trains per hour, as opposed to about 25 trains per hour at Times Square. However, QBL is littered with horrible terminals. The worst offender has to be Forest Hills, where it can only turn around 20 trains per hour. Even with this reduced capacity, trains routinely get backed up at Forest Hills, meaning delays can ripple to as early as 63rd Drive. The reason why is because of that switch placement and different regulations. When a train gets to Forest Hills, the operator has to do a bunch of procedures. Then the operator has to move that train out of the station at a very restricted speed, travel a long distance, and switch over onto the other track, and get the train back to Forest Hills. That process, at best, takes 3 minutes, which is why Forest Hills is capped at 20 trains per hour. Even if you try to make things more efficient, I don't think we can increase the turnaround capacity substantially without creating even more of a backlog than today. But there is another bad terminal, Jamaica Center. On paper, it should be a good terminal, a large island platform, and tail tracks. But it is only capable of turning around 12 trains per hour. Why? Because of the switch placement before the station. Many elite terminals like Hudson Yards are capable of turning around 30 trains per hour or more, as the switches are placed right before the station. This means that less time is spent on the wrong way tracks, which could delay incoming trains. However, those switches at Jamaica Center are placed far from the station itself, which means more time is spent on the wrong way tracks, which holds up trains trying to terminate at Jamaica Center. That extra time eats into capacity, which is why Jamaica Center is rated for 12 trains per hour. What makes the terminal situation worse is that there is an elite terminal, Jamaica 179th Street. This terminal can turn 63 trains per hour on 2 tracks, averaging 31.5 trains per hour on each track. Between 1988 and 1992, that terminal did in fact get well used. However, because of politics and how riders east of 71st Avenue wanted their express, all locals ended at Forest Hills. This meant wasted potential on QBL, where the terminals that can handle large numbers of trains aren't used, and are substituted by terminals that are low capacity. But the next reason why the 7 is better than QBL is because there is better urban planning. Yes, the 7 has stations that have pretty bad urban planning, like this abomination at Metz Willets Point, but QBL is built below a wide boulevard. This means that the catchment area for QBL stations is taken up by this giant road. It also doesn't help that for some stations, there are nearby expressways that take up even more of the catchment area. 65th Street, Woodhaven Boulevard, Kew Gardens, and Briarwood all have an expressway slicing through the station. On the other hand, the 7 train runs above Roosevelt Avenue, a 2-lane road. This means less of the catchment area is roads and more shops, markets, restaurants, and housing. Again, the 7 has some expressways built near stations like 69th Street, but again, it is not to the same extent that QBL is. Related to urban planning, the 7 is elevated, which makes it a cultural icon. For one, the 7 dominates the landscape, which makes it much harder to miss than a subway. And while riding the 7, it offers different views of each neighborhood, making it easier to see the diversity of Queens. Underneath the L, there's so much activity, like night markets. QBL has fewer of that, thanks to the IND's decision of excessively widening Queens Boulevard when they built that line, thus destroying some of that density in the process. Now, here's where things get interesting. The 7 train's strength and load distribution. The 7 sees 800,000 riders every day, and is designed as a radial line. This means that those 800,000 riders fill up before discharging all at once in Manhattan. That is going to create problems, as the 800,000 rider load will overload stations like Times Square, Fifth Avenue, and Grand Central, causing delays. Except that doesn't happen, because of how the 7 distributes its 800,000 rider load. The 7 has 2 services during rush hour, the 7 Express and 7 Local. How that works is that the 7 Express takes in most riders at Flushing, Metz Willets, and Junction Boulevard. The 7 Local picks up riders at 111th and 103rd, which then riders get off at Junction Boulevard to transfer to the Express. The 7 Local then picks up riders at 90th and 82nd, and then at 74th Street, those commuters discharge to transfer to QBL for Manhattan-bound services. The 7 Local then picks up more riders from 74th to 33rd, and then discharges them at Queensboro Plaza for Manhattan-bound services, with the Express doing the same. There is another opportunity to transfer at Court Square, before we get into Manhattan. As you can see, the 7 train does very well in load distribution. Instead of a typical radial line, where commuters slowly pack onto the train before letting them all out at the first station in Manhattan, there are opportunities for 7 train commuters to transfer at other stations in Queens for Manhattan-bound services, like 74th Street, Queensboro Plaza, and Court Square. This helps spread the load at Grand Central, Fifth Avenue, and Times Square. Meanwhile, QBL doesn't have that luxury. QBL is designed as a typical radial line, with all commuters slowly piling up before discharging them at a specific station in Manhattan. However, on QBL, there are no other faster opportunities to Manhattan. Maybe the Z train in Jamaica, but that is a joke. But anyways, that creates delays and crowding at Manhattan stations, like Lexington Avenue, 53rd Street. But the final reason is possibly the most wild of them all. The 7 is good because it does so at QBL's expense. So let's take a look at the load distribution again. But this time zoom in closer at Roosevelt Avenue. Already, Roosevelt Avenue is already a pretty bad place to transfer because of the people trying to transfer from local stations. But then you have the 7 train commuters making their way down to the platform. And there is a lot of them, especially from 82nd and 90th Streets. If those riders between 90th and 69th transferred at 61st for the express, we might be looking at something similar to Roosevelt Avenue for the 7 express train. But that isn't the case, because of the express E and F trains at 74th Street. So most people opt to transfer there instead. This helps prevent a Roosevelt Avenue type situation at 61st Street. But by doing so, it makes Roosevelt Avenue even worse off, causing the variability graph to go up. So to an extent, the 7 train is good at QBL's expense. Now, how do we fix QBL so that it can be on the same level as the 7 train? For one, deinterlining QBL will help. I'll go much deeper on QBL deinterlining in my next video, but I'll make a few points here. There are many ways to deinterline QBL, from a partial deinterlining to a complete deinterlining. For now, I think an F&M swap is the best option. This helps preserves easy access to Lexington services, gives both 6th and 8th Avenue Express options, and reduces overcrowding in stations in Manhattan, as riders will opt to take the first train that arrives, not wait for the next E train. But in the future, when ridership surpasses 2015 levels, we can seriously discuss a complete deinterline. But for now, an F&M swap would do. But deinterlining is the first step, as I said multiple times. It doesn't solve the huge transferring load at Roosevelt Avenue, nor the capacity issues at Forest Hills. So the second thing I would add is an express station at Woodhaven Boulevard. Many deinterliners balk at me for saying that this is necessary, but it is. You'll cry about the reliability of the system, which I agree with. But here is an instance where unreliability isn't caused by merging conflicts, but by simple overcrowding. So let's be consistent here, and try our best to resolve the issue, because crowding will only increase because of the IBX. Yes, you can add platform controllers or maybe expand the station, but that is more expensive than converting Woodhaven Boulevard into an express station. Woodhaven Boulevard is built to be converted, while Roosevelt Avenue, not so much. Therefore, converting Woodhaven Boulevard is the objectively better solution. Many E and F train riders may say that this will add time to their trips, but Roosevelt is often held up because of the sheer amount of people transferring. But by spreading out the load, trains at Roosevelt will be held up, meaning either net zero or even decreased commuting times is possible. Also, Woodhaven Boulevard itself is a transit hub, with multiple high ridership buses like the Q52 and 53 and the Q88 ending there. This means that a 1C ride express to Woodhaven Boulevard is more and more valuable. Finally, for improving capacity in terminals, let's start with Forest Hills. We have 3 options. The first one, which is the one I favor, is building QueensLink. Not only would QueensLink create a north-south link in Queens, something that is needed, but it will also add capacity on the local tracks of QBL. Since QueensLink can divert 10 trains per hour away from Forest Hills, this means more service can be added on the local tracks of QBL. I really don't get why there is such an obsession with this merge, as not all merges are created equal. Some merges are horrible like DeKalb and 59th, while others are mid like 33rd Street and 75th Avenue. And some merges are good, like QueensLink. The second option is to build a 5th track at Forest Hills for terminating local trains. This will raise the turnaround capacity at Forest Hills from 20 to 40 trains per hour, as it will give an extra track for terminating trains. The final one is to extend all local service to 179th Street, since 179th Street can turn around 63 trains per hour on 2 tracks, though you might get into a political fight. But then again, according to a 1993 MTA study, 77% of QBL riders would benefit from a local extension to 179th Street. So really, this change would be beneficial to the vast majority of QBL riders. Now, for improving Jamaica Center turnaround capacity, there are two options. The first one is to improve the switch placement, but that is going to result in moving around some columns in the tunnels, which means closing down Archer Avenue is probably needed. In my opinion, that doesn't justify the cost. The second option, which is the one I favor, is to extend the E train to Springfield Boulevard via the LIRR Atlantic branch. This way, not only would you have a proper terminal, but you would also get access to another yard for QBL at Gwen Eiffel Park. This new yard will help out with the capacity increases that will come with CBTC and de-interlining. And with that, this marks the end of this video. What are your thoughts? Tell us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.